Hey everyone, I'm Tim Wills and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to look at your two biggest costs, what they are, how to make a few savings in that area, and what those savings would mean to your retirement account later in life. It almost goes without saying that people who contribute more to their retirement savings has less expenses in relation to their income, and that's because they're saving rather than spending. So it would make sense then that reducing your expenses could lead to a fatter retirement account when that time comes. So let's have a look at what your two biggest expenses are, and no surprises with number one, it's accommodation. The average American spends $12,700 on rent each year and nearly $19,000 on mortgage repayments if they own a house. And number two is your car. Between gas, insurance, and maintenance, your car can cost you about $4,000 each and every year, and that assumes you already own the car outright. If you don't own the car and you're making repayments, that number could be even higher. Now, obviously, there are exceptions. If you live with your parents and don't pay rent, then your accommodation costs are going to be a lot lower. And if you walk to work every day, then you're probably not going to be spending much on transportation either. But we are assuming you do have these expenses, so let's dive into how to reduce them and what that could mean for your future retirement savings. First of all, there's no easy way to reduce these two expenses. If we're talking about coffee or going out, then it's easy enough to reduce those expenses because you just do it less often. But with accommodation, you can't exactly do it less often, and transportation, I suppose you could. But we'll dive into how you can reduce your accommodation expenses first. The best advice is to usually leave the city. Go live in the suburbs where rent is often a lot cheaper. There's also the option of getting flatmates or going and living with your parents. If you don't want to leave where you are though, you can also negotiate with your landlord. If you've been a good tenant and paid your bills on time, your landlord will likely be happy to give you a small reduction in your rent each month. For them, turnover is a hassle. They have to list the house, advertise it for new tenants, and it could lead to having an empty apartment for weeks or months that isn't earning any money at all. So there's just a whole lot of complications that come with tenant turnover. So if you're a good tenant and you're paying your bills on time, you may have a bit of negotiating power in that area. So if you're renting and you want to pay less, you can negotiate, move out of the city, get flatmates, or move in with your parents. But what if you're paying a mortgage? Packing up and moving isn't quite so easy, so let's take moving out of the equation. You can still get flatmates, you can still rent out a room on Airbnb. You can also refinance your mortgage and get a slightly lower interest rate. Of course, talk to a professional about that one. Or if you wanted to get really creative, you could rent out a room to photographers in your city for photo shoots. Just an idea. So that's housing costs taken care of. What about transportation? Now, the best option in this area is, of course, to start walking and cycling everywhere. But if you can't do that and if it's not feasible, then there are heaps of other options on how to save money in this area. Public transport is a really good one. Depending on your city, you can get a monthly pass for unlimited rides on public transport. Carpooling is cheaper, and it also takes the pressure off busy highways for other motorists. Plus, there's heaps of tips on how to save fuel. Keeping your tyres full of air and checking oil regularly are two good ones. Of course, if you're driving a gas-guzzling car or truck, maybe it's time to look at downgrading, getting a more economical car. But on the other end, if you're driving a car that's always breaking down, maybe it's time to upgrade and get something that is going to be more reliable and cost less in the long term. Okay, with that taken care of, let's have a look at the difference that saving a bit of money now on those costs can have on your future savings. Rent and vehicle costs combined are about $16,700 a year. So if you're 25 and we're able to make a 10% saving in this area, which is about $1,700, over the next 40 years, your rest of your working life, you'd be able to save about $500,000. That's only a 10% saving. What about a 15, 30, or even 50% saving? Well, 15% equates to $750,000, 30% is $1.5 million, and if you were able to halve your two biggest expenses over the next 40 years, that could be worth $2.5 million. So what value do you put on your car and house? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you back here next week.